To hear in an intervention before me from the member of Thornhill that members of Parliament, specifically that the New Democrats joined in this occupation and then boasted about it, is absolutely disgusting.
Illegal occupation of Parliament, complicitness by an official party, and threats of violence between Liberal MPs for how they voted. No, this wasn't a Tom Clancy novel. This was the House of Commons on Friday afternoon. Let's take a look.
The honourable member for Thornhill had a point of privilege. I'm now ready to hear her point of privilege.
I'm rising on that question of privilege that I rose on earlier. And it is about the occupation that took place in the Confederation building this week. And you probably know, and you may have heard by now, Madam Speaker, that a group of 100 protesters in an orchestrated and coordinated fashion entered the Confederation building and undertook an occupation of that building. And while these events occurred on Tuesday, it is in the subsequent days that additional details have come to light, which I would respectfully submit as a means to my question of privilege, and that it satisfies the timeliness requirement. According to the news reports published on CBC's website even on Tuesday morning, quote, the demonstration started around 8:45 a.m. and the protesters said that they would allow MPs with offices in the building to pass through the crowd, but those MPs would have to listen to demonstrators' demands on the way in. Officers of the Parliamentary Protection Service and the Ottawa Police were on the scene asking people if they had any business inside the building before letting them in. And by 10 a.m., the protesters were removed from the building where they were chanting outside. The police and the PPS members intercepted and then released 14 protesters without charges. End quote. However, in the subsequent days, Madam Speaker, additional news reports featuring additional comments and confessions by the protesters' organizers came to light. On Wednesday, Politico published a piece with an interview with a protest organizer named Rachel Small, whose goal was, quote, it was to interrupt the daily business of Parliament by not letting MPs walk through these marble hallways, end quote. The Globe and Mail.
Having a hard time hearing the member. I'm going to ask the Sergeant at Arms to go and check what's going on in the hall to see if they can quiet that down. I also want to just remind members that when we go through points of privilege, questions of privilege, the rule of the chair is to decide the matter merits priority over all other business, which I have done, except for depending on what the House is used to. But also, we need to make sure that that it's a brief summary of what has transpired, and so that I can determine whether or not we need to move on, and whether or not others want to provide other information to this. I also just want to check. I see there is a raised hand. I'm not sure if it's a question of privilege, if it's on the question of privilege or a point of order. So the honour member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
Madam Speaker, it's just to have the floor once the member for Thornhill is done on this point of privilege.
Perfect. So the honourable member for Thornhill.
Now, Melissa Landsman has been speaking for about 2.5 minutes. I've timed it. And Carol Hughes, NDP, because Carol Hughes has read the question of privilege that Melissa Landsman has sent in. Carol is already talking about the fact, well, this should be brief. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you will remember Michael Chong, who raised his question of privilege about his family and himself being threatened by China. And the Liberal government didn't even tell him until last year. So he rose to speak about a question of privilege for about 18 minutes. 18 minutes. And let me tell you, nobody, and I mean nobody, interrupted him, and nobody talked to him about brevity. So already I'm very disappointed in Carol Hughes in intervening in this way. But let's continue.
Sorry, another point of order. The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
Madam Speaker, I just want to go back to the point you just made, that a point of privilege is supposed to be something that's of substantive. The issue here is whether or not it's being used to filibuster and interrupt
Order.
other members. Now, we know the person heckling me who wants women to go to backstreet abortionists, she can take her turn. The issue here is the interruption.
Charlie Angus, everybody. Like, what a deplorable comment. What a deplorable comment in the House of Commons. And that's going to be unanswered unless somebody removes it. But here's the thing, folks. The NDP is starting to get a little uncomfortable because they know what's coming. They know what's coming.
The House of Commons by the false use of a point
So
of privilege.
I just want to remind members to please be respectful. I just want to ask the honourable member if she can get to indicate the point of order that the point of privilege, the question of privilege she has brought forward, in order to make sure that I have a full understanding of it. But again, as briefly as it should be a brief summary and not take hours to speak about. I have another point of order. Sorry, the honourable member for Bow River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The comment that was just made by the member for the NDP, I would like to have him apologize and withdraw that comment, Madam Speaker. It was totally out of line, totally unacceptable comment to be made in this House.
Yeah, I just asked the honourable member to withdraw the comment.
I withdraw, but they voted against.
I would just ask members to please be respectful and not add more to what they had to say. I had to do this yesterday as well. I would also ask the honourable from St. Albert Edmonton. Again, he thinks that I'm not hearing what he's saying, and I certainly do hear what he says, and so it's very problematic. And so what the issue that I raised was because when I first started the point of privilege was I should have read a document to speak about the question of privilege and how people bring those forward. And so I forgot to do that. So I just wanted to bring it forward at that point just to indicate that it is a brief summary of what has transpired. The honourable member, knowing that it's a short day, the honourable member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, I've spoken for just a couple of moments to give you context, and I will not be silenced by that member about the personal safety of members of this House and his toxic masculinity in here.
Well played, Melissa. Toxic masculinity. Ladies and gentlemen, that's been the buzzword of the far left for probably 3 years now. Toxic masculinity. Nobody can define what that is, by the way. But I love that she just threw that out there, trying to essentially use their own words against them on that. And you can see her eyes on that as well. But the important thing is I don't think Charlie Angus could see her eyes on when she made that comment. So well played for throwing that back in their face, Melissa.
The thing that he accuses others of doing. But, Madam Speaker, I'm going to continue on this context because it's important. And it is not only my privilege that is breached, but it is everybody that has an office in the Confederation building and those who tried to access the parliamentary precinct. And I have lots of examples of where this has been heard in this House and in committee. But on Wednesday evening, I understand it, also the Western Standard published an insightful piece on the protest. And this is where that member should be ashamed of himself. The organization the protest was supported The organization who protested was supported. The support was provided by New Democrats.
Shameful.
The article opens as follows.
Shameful.
Quote, a group of approximately 130 Jewish Canadians took over Parliament Hill's Confederation building Tuesday morning in support of Palestine, demanding an arms embargo on Israel. 3 New Democrats, the member for Edmonton Strathcona, the member for Hamilton Centre, the member for Winnipeg Centre, joined the 100 protesters occupying the lobby of that building, where members of Parliament have offices, where about 30 of them stayed outside. The article quotes later a lady named Mrs. Small. 3 MPs came down, said Small, naming 3 NDP MPs. The member for Winnipeg Centre said that she was so proud to be there. And I'm not trying to speak on her behalf, but I was very touched by that, end quote. Madam Speaker, these subsequent interviews and these things that we've read in the news later, that came to light later, since the events of Tuesday morning, which I will submit also form the basis of a breach of privilege and equally from the basis of the timeliness necessary in bringing this point of privilege forward.
This is why this is such a problem for the NDP. Because you have these virtue signaling far leftists that love to, rub off on anything that they think is going to be a great cause. So they decided to hang out with these people, encourage them, and say what a great job and how proud they are. How proud they are. Now, this organization was allegedly Jews against Israel, or Jews for Palestine. The issue is that we've seen these pro-Palestinian protests turn into riots. There was also a bomb threat on Parliament Hill from anti-Jewish organizations. Should we say anti-Israel organizations? Now, you don't have to be a Jewish supporter to say that a bomb threat on Parliament Hill is probably not a good thing. And this was actually brought up by one of the Conservative MPs who actually started to break down crying because she had her children with her that day.
To have one of my children feel scared for his mom, asking if it's okay for her to stay in the building if I'm going to be safe at work because of what he witnessed. That's unacceptable for anybody in this country when they go to work. How was this not taken more seriously, given any one of those who were protesting could have had a different motive, could have had different intent? This place, this institution must be safe and a peaceful place. This was not the case. And to hear in an intervention before me from the member of Thornhill that members of Parliament, specifically that the New Democrats joined in this occupation and then boasted about it, is absolutely disgusting.
And the NDP, after point of order after point of order after point of order from primarily Charlie Angus, because he doesn't give a crap, and was even saying to the speaker, you should be dismissing this outright. It's reprehensible. And Melissa Lantsman goes on to cite example after example after example where impeding physically an MP from actually getting to their office was classified as, if not a question of privilege, a contempt of Parliament. There was a question of privilege that was granted because a bus was late. So if you're going to grant a question of privilege on a bus being late, you have to be able to grant a question of privilege on the fact that parliamentary police were turning people away from the front door and telling them, maybe you shouldn't go in the building, or if you need to, go through the basement. People that were visiting the MP's offices for business that day. The ambassador for Israel had a meeting with Perkins, and his office called and said, due to the safety concerns with the protest being there, we're canceling the meeting. And you had parliamentary police coming through telling MPs to lock their doors because they're going to be escorting these protesters through the halls in order to exit the building. So there's some questions on what happened there. You know, we've spoken to many of the parliamentary police officers. They're awesome people. They take their job seriously. So, you know, there's procedures that were executed that nobody here has full context of, so I can't comment on it. But the Conservatives were raising questions about it. But just on the fact that you had people that were occupying a lobby, I would not say that they took over the building. That's a little bit sensationalist. But you have people sitting in this lobby, huge banners chanting, you know, that's going to be kind of concerning. Never mind the fact is they're not allowed to be there. You're allowed to protest on Parliament Hill. You're not allowed to protest in the lobby of these buildings. Can't do that. It's illegal. And we know it's illegal because the people were arrested for being there. They weren't charged, but they were arrested. Funny how they're allowed to go into a building and protest, get arrested, and face no charges. Yet you had people that were protesting lawfully charged for mischief and are on trial for that, waiting for a verdict. Chris Barber, Tamara Leach. This is the insanity that is going on right now. So the good news is, after dozens, and I mean dozens of point of orders, NDP gave it right back to the Conservatives. So, you know, tit for tat. But I think the NDP were trying to make this as disruptive as possible to try to avoid their participation in this, because it looks really bad. And if they're supporting an act that resulted or that will ultimately result in being classified as a prima facie case for a breach of privilege, that doesn't look very good at all, does it? These three MPs, you know, it's possible they might be found in contempt of Parliament. Who knows? Depends on how this shakes out. But we'll see how it goes. So the question of privilege was able to proceed. It was able to complete. And, you know, a decision will be made on that going forward. But before it could complete, there was something really strange that happened that had nothing to do with the NDP, that had nothing to do with the Conservatives, but it had everything to do with the Liberals. Take a look.
I also see the honourable member for Surrey Newton.
I rise today to address the Sikh genocide. There have been consultation among the parties, and I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motion: that the House acknowledge and recognize that the crimes committed against Sikhs within India in and following 1984 constitute a genocide.
I'm already hearing a number of no's.
So this was really random. So this Liberal MP rose during the question of privilege after many other points of order on the question of privilege and arguing back and forth. And all of a sudden he brings forth a motion to seek unanimous consent and says, I believe you will find unanimous consent, strange, for a completely left field issue, acknowledging that an event that happened in 1984 to some Sikhs, and I don't even know what this is about, was genocide. And then someone said no. At least one person said no, since D'Entremont had said, I'm already hearing no's. So that was strange. So, okay. So I thought that was bizarre, but we're back to the question of privilege. And I kept watching it. And then this happened.
Going on, the honourable member for Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, a few minutes back, member from Surrey Newton introduced a motion seeking unanimous consent, and I said no. I believe on the way out of this chamber, the member threatened that I will be yeffed up. So another member also aggressively accosted me in the lobby. I feel that as a member of parliament, I should be able to express my opinion, my views freely in the House, and I should not be felt threatened by any words or actions of my fellow members.
Thank you, the honourable member, for bringing that forward. I guess we'll talk to the honourable member about the proper way to look into that particular issue.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to be clear. You had a Liberal member stand up asking for a motion for unanimous consent about an event that happened in 1984 to acknowledge it as a genocide. Another Liberal opposed that unanimous consent. And then after that, the person who opposed it was told he would be effed up. And then another Liberal member came to that same person and threatened him again. So you have 3 different Liberals, 2 of them threatening the other with physical violence because of what he voted on. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. Like, this isn't like a Daryl Stinson thing where he's just, bluster and all this stuff. You have people actually literally seriously threatening these people for how they voted. Now, Don Tremont said at the end, we will talk to you after to advise you how to deal with this. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a question of privilege. He's to be raising a question of privilege because he was being threatened with violence because of how he voted on a motion. So, this is the issue. I don't get it. The Liberal Party is floundering so badly, they can't even get along with themselves. Never mind the rest of the House. So this is what you have going on in Justin Trudeau's Canada, in Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party. I have nothing to say other than this is ridiculous. The House is a disaster. Everything's in chaos. They even when they weren't dealing with the question of privilege of Melissa Lantsman and the SDTC, they still couldn't get hardly anything done. So it's time to go, folks. It's time to go. Like when Justin Trudeau's party is threatening to beat each other up based on how they vote, it's time to go. It's time for an election. Like, enough is enough.